In a quiet rural town in the state of Vermont, there stood an old white farmhouse at the end of a long gravel road. Tall maple trees surrounded the house, and in autumn their leaves painted the ground in shades of red and gold. Inside that farmhouse lived an elderly woman named Helen Carter. Helen was 79 years old. Her hair had turned completely silver, and she walked slowly, with the help of a wooden cane. Most people in town described her as kind, but very private. She had lived in that farmhouse for more than 40 years. The house itself was filled with memories. Old photographs covered the walls, wooden furniture creaked softly when someone sat down, and the scent of old books lingered in the air. But there was one part of the house Helen rarely visited: the attic. The attic door was located at the end of a narrow hallway on the second floor. It was always closed, and a thin layer of dust covered the handle. People in town often wondered why Helen never went up there. The truth was simple. The attic held memories she was not ready to face. One spring morning, Helen's neighbor, a 26-year-old man named Ethan Miller, came by to help repair a broken fence. Ethan had moved to the town only a year earlier, but he had quickly become friends with Helen. After finishing the fence, Ethan stepped onto the porch and wiped his hands on a cloth. "You know," he said with a smile, "this house must have a lot of history." Helen chuckled softly. "More than you can imagine." Ethan glanced toward the hallway inside the house. "What about the attic?" "I've lived next door for a year, and I've never seen you go up there." Helen hesitated. For a moment she said nothing. Then she sighed. "I suppose it's time someone helped me clean it." Ethan's eyes brightened. "I'd be happy to help." Later that afternoon, the two of them stood at the bottom of the attic stairs. Helen slowly opened the door, and a cloud of dust drifted into the hallway. Ethan climbed the wooden ladder first and switched on a small hanging light. The attic was large but cluttered. Old trunks, boxes, and pieces of furniture were scattered everywhere. "It looks like a time capsule," Ethan said. Helen slowly climbed the ladder and stepped into the attic. Her eyes moved around the room, stopping on objects she had not seen in decades. Old suitcases, faded photographs, stacks of books. And then, in the far corner of the attic, there was a large wooden chest. The chest was dark brown with metal corners and a heavy brass lock. Ethan noticed it immediately. "That looks interesting," he said. Helen froze. She had not opened that chest in more than 50 years. Ethan walked over and brushed dust off the lid. "Should we see what's inside?" Helen nodded slowly. "Yes, I suppose we should." The lock had rusted over time, but with a little effort Ethan managed to open it. When the lid creaked open, they both leaned closer. Inside the chest were dozens of old envelopes tied together with faded ribbons. Letters. Hundreds of them. Ethan carefully picked one up. The paper had yellowed with age, and the handwriting on the front was elegant but slightly faded. "Who are these from?" he asked. Helen took the letter gently. Her fingers trembled as she read the name. Thomas. Ethan looked confused. "Thomas who?" Helen sat down on a nearby wooden chair. Her eyes grew distant, as if she were looking back through time. "Thomas Walker," she said quietly. "Who was he?" Ethan asked. Helen took a deep breath. "He was the love of my life." Ethan remained silent, sensing the weight of her words. Helen explained that many years earlier, when she was just 19, she had fallen in love with a young man named Thomas. Thomas was brave, kind, and full of dreams. He planned to become a writer someday. But in 1968, Thomas had been sent overseas as a soldier during the Vietnam War. Before leaving, he had made Helen a promise. "I'll write to you every week," he had said. And he kept that promise. Every week, letters arrived. Some were long and detailed. Others were short messages written quickly before another mission. In those letters, Thomas described everything: the jungle heat, the friendships he made, and how much he missed home. But most importantly, he always wrote about Helen. He wrote about the life they would build together once he returned. Ethan listened quietly as Helen opened several letters and read small pieces aloud. One letter said, "Dear Helen, the nights are quiet here, but I still hear your laughter in my mind. It keeps me strong." Another letter read, When I come home, we'll build a little house somewhere peaceful, maybe with a garden. Ethan swallowed hard. What happened to him? He asked gently. Helen closed her eyes. He never came back. One day, the letters stopped arriving. Weeks later, a military officer came to Helen's door with terrible news. Thomas had been killed during a mission. Helen never married anyone else. Instead, she kept every letter Thomas had ever written and placed them in the attic chest. I couldn't throw them away, she whispered, but I couldn't read them again either. Ethan looked at the chest filled with letters. That's an incredible story, he said softly. Helen smiled faintly. Yes, it is. After a moment, Ethan had an idea. Do you mind if I ask you something? Helen nodded. What is it? Ethan looked at the letters again. Would you let me help you organize them? Helen raised an eyebrow. Organize them? Yes, Ethan said. These letters are a beautiful story. Maybe one day they could even become a book. Helen looked surprised. A book. Ethan smiled. People should know about Thomas and about the love you shared. Helen looked down at the letters for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. All right, she said. Let's do it. That afternoon, the dusty attic became a place of quiet storytelling. For the first time in 50 years, Helen began reading the letters again. And with each letter, the memories that once caused pain slowly turned into something else. Something warm. Something beautiful. A story worth remembering.